Mr. Murphy, you shouldn't. You're already drunk. Don't worry, baby. I can still make love to you. Yeah, that's the reason why you're unable. What do you think you're doing, baby? Getting in the car? No, I think you should walk home tonight. But Mr. Murphy, it's snowing. It's the middle of the night. How will I get home like this? You'll make it. What a... Damn car. You? What are you doing here at this hour? But anyways, it's a good thing you're here. On the night of New Year's Eve, on a lonely street in Chicago, mob boss George Murphy was found lifeless. He was shot and mutilated. Police immediately began the investigation. However, as of now, there was only one question on everyone's mind. Who would take over Murphy's syndicate after him? George Murphy wasn't survived by any children. And when news of his death got around, everyone assumed either his nephew or his rivals would take over. George Murphy's body was taken for a post-mortem, while the police found a knife at the crime scene, on which fingerprints were discovered. However, there was still much uncertainty as to who the culprit was. Hence, Officer Ethan Graham, who was in charge of the investigation, called in all suspects for interrogation. George Murphy's wife, Mrs. Marilyn Murphy, sat at the table wiping her tears, sobbing as she looked at Officer Graham. He asked her, "How was Mr. Murphy?" "He loved me, and I loved him. I can't believe he's gone. Georgie and I met almost 16 years ago. We used to live in the same neighborhood. He knew my family. After we got married, he fulfilled my every wish, every desire. He never let the smile leave my face." Did Mr. Murphy have enemies? Not that I know of. These newspapers write all sorts of things about him. But I knew Georgie well. He was a good man. He was a religious man. He took care of his family, his relatives. He used to help everyone. Only a monster could take the life of a man like Georgie. You have to find him. After speaking with Mrs. Murphy, Officer Graham called for Andre Murphy, Mr. Murphy's nephew. The man walked in, sat down, looking unbothered. Mr. Andre, you don't seem to be moved by what has happened. I can't explain how much my uncle's demise has torn me down, but that's not for others to know. He was a father figure to me. After my father passed away, when I was 7, it was Uncle George who took me under his wing and cared for me. I wouldn't be anything today without him. Yes, but you are the biggest benefactor to your uncle's death. Are you trying to say I've done this? You think I would harm my uncle? For money? For power? You don't think I already had money and could do whatever I want? My uncle doesn't have any children. He raised me like a son. I am the prince of my uncle. True, but can't there be any other reason? What reason? How about your father? Your father and your uncle used to do business together. And one day, on business, your father passed away. And your uncle took over everything. Isn't that a little suspicious? What if your Uncle George was behind your father's death? That's impossible. That's impossible. They were brothers. They would give their life for each other. After hours of interrogation, Officer Graham called in his last suspect, Penelope Jameson, George Murphy's mistress. What kind of man was George Murphy? What kind of man? You know how men like him are. What do you mean? Everyone knows what business Mr. Murphy was involved in, but the law never touched him, because politicians and police like you owe debt to him. Mr. Murphy knew how to take advantage of people, and he continued to do just that, harm people. There wasn't anything good you can say about him. He gambled, he drank, he abused. He wasn't a human being, he was a monster. Then what is a nice girl like you doing with a monster? You think I was with him by my choice? My father owed him money from a gambling debt. When he couldn't pay Mr. Murphy back, he blackmailed him for me, or he would finish us all. I didn't have a choice but to live as his kept woman. You know you're a prime suspect. You were with him that night. Lord is my witness. I didn't do it, but I wish from the bottom of my heart, if only it was me. What do you think of his nephew, Andre Murphy? Like uncle, like nephew. He was another pig. Mr. Murphy was an old man, and Andre was always after me. Leave the old man. How about I satisfy you tonight? Leave me alone, Andre. Is there something you know that you're not telling? I've told you how it is. We haven't revealed this to anyone, but the fingerprints on the knife that was found at the crime scene belongs to Andre. What? Then why aren't you arresting him? Because it wasn't the knife that took his life. It was the bullet. And even if it was him, we have him under surveillance. You may leave now. Why would you give her such information? To trace what she does with this information. Keep an eye on her. Yes. They found his fingerprints, but they're not arresting him because they suspect the person who shot him was someone else. Don't worry. They'll find him soon. After keeping all suspects under surveillance, the police weren't able to reach much of a conclusion. However, it was the following day, after receiving a lead from an anonymous informant. A car was discovered from the lake just outside the city. The same car that was spotted in the security footage on that night. The car belonged to none other than Andre Murphy. And inside was the murder weapon. Arrest him. Considering everything, there was no doubt left. Andre Murphy was charged with murder. It wasn't me. It was a trap. Andre Murphy was tried at court, and as all evidence went against him, he was sentenced to life. After Andre Murphy was arrested, the syndicate began to fall apart. Rivals began to take over, and syndicate members themselves became divided. We have to choose someone to take Mr. Murphy's position. Who? Marilyn Murphy. To maintain unity in the syndicate, Mr. Murphy's closest men chose his wife, Marilyn, to take power, even though she knew nothing about their business, but could rather easily be controlled by them. The plan worked. Of course it did. Being forced to live with him, Penelope despised George Murphy more than anything in the world. She was disgusted by George, the kind of man he was, and the kinds of things he did. How about you stay with me tonight? She's my wife. Really? You know I don't follow the rules. I make them. George took advantage of people's weakness, and everyone was weaker than him. And in all this, Penelope had to bear through it for life. Every night, George used her. Living became a misery for her. But it was one night, at the bar, a mysterious bearded man approached her. What a sick man. I don't know how you live with him. Who are you? What do you want? Who am I? It's better that you don't know who I am. And I don't want anything. I want to offer you something. What? Your freedom. Get away from me. That night, Penelope didn't pay the man any heed, and she didn't see him again. Some days later came Christmas Eve, but it was one of the most devastating nights for Penelope. She had lost everything, her virtue, her dignity. She wondered if she was still a human being or just someone's dog. Coming home feeling horrible, she was shocked to find someone had broken in. It was the same bearded man. How did you... You need a drink. I know what Mr. Murphy did with you. He's a monster. He's heartless. And his nephew is just like him. As long as they live, they won't let anyone else live. But together, we can get rid of both of them. How? The plan was simple. Penelope would drug Mr. Murphy's drink on New Year's night. Mr. Murphy wouldn't be able to drive and would have to walk home. And to set up the crime scene, Penelope would steal Andre's knife and car keys. What? I can't take a life. You think I'll allow you to have that privilege? I'm going to do it myself. Don't you want your revenge? So Penelope did as he said. She offered Andre something he always desired. What a Christmas gift. And on the right opportunity, she stole Andre's knife and his car keys. And just as planned on New Year's night, it was the bearded man who took George's life. Before Penelope staged the crime to frame Andre. But when the police didn't arrest Andre immediately, they set up his car with a murder weapon and anonymously tipped the police. And now that everything went according to plan, Penelope expected her share. Your freedom. Sir, now what? The game has just begun. Everyone's playing their games, but I'll decide where this ends. Do you want revenge for what happened to your uncle? Or what happened to you? You know who's behind this?
Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.